Hello, BookTube, and welcome to day 3 of Litmas. That's a literary event that was invented by Adrian at Strip Cover Lit, in which every day for 12 days at Christmas time, we talk about a different aspect of literature. And the prompt for day 3 is your favorite short story. And that's enormous, of course. And that sent me to my bookshelves just again, for an hour that I absolutely could not spare from work. I am buried in year-end work, but it was too much fun not to do. I went all over the admittedly small part of my personal library that's devoted to the made-up stories, and pulling down one volume or another of great short stories from masters of the form, not just Guy de Maupassant, but also Frank O'Connor, Liam O'Flaherty, Elizabeth Bowen, John O'Hara, John Cheever, Flannery O'Connor, the great Eudora Welty, Why I Live at the P.O. I ended up spending time revisiting these great short stories from literature, these authors I love. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized that that if I follow the stress of Adrian's prompt, which is my favorite short story instead of the best short stories, then they go in a different direction entirely. They go in the direction of short stories that I read and reread almost like a personal mythology, rather than things that I look at for their artistic merit, for a Henry James type reason. Things like Kaa's Hunting by Rudyard Kipling, in which the little jungle boy Mowgli is abducted by the Bandar Log, the monkey people, and saved by his friend, the Black Panther, and a bear, and also a very perilous ally, a gigantic rock python named Kaa. That is just incredibly good. It's just amazingly good. And if you don't stray from the Jungle Books, you have How Fear Came, which is also incredibly good. Just an amazing short story. And I know them backwards and forwards. I love them so much. And that got me thinking, when I started concentrating on just enjoyment, on just the enjoyment that short stories bring me, that got me to the genres, to genre fiction, specifically to science fiction and mystery, which, if you leave out westerns, surely have the most short stories racked up to their name in the last 300 years of anything. And I love science fiction and fantasy. I absolutely do. I read all the novels when they come rolling down the pike every year. But I think, like a lot of people, and certainly like a lot of people of my generation, I was introduced to science fiction and fantasy through short stories rather than novels, and just soaked them up. I have been reading Asimov's science fiction and Analog and Omni and Astounding Stories. I have been reading science fiction pulp periodicals forever, just forever, and soaking up the short stories, some of which I still subscribe to Science Fiction and Fantasy magazine, Analog, and especially Asimov's. And in every issue, there will be 2 or 3 stories that are truly, truly good. And in almost every issue of Asimov's, I don't know how they do it. I guess it's because their editor's a woman of genius, but in almost every issue of Asimov's, there's one story that's spectacularly good. Just that's the satisfying experience of a novel all at once. So I was thinking about that, and then I again realized, well, no, when you talk about that, you're talking about excellence, not favorite. Favorite doesn't have to be good. That's one of the points that I'm hoping is getting more and more stressed here on BookTube as 2017 turns into 2018, is that your favorites don't have to be good. You don't have to claim they're good. And it's healthy for you critically to differentiate between what pushes your buttons and what is actually technically really good. That's actually very healthy, so that we don't have Twilight on college curricula. But when I started thinking like that, I realized that as much as I love a lot of those spectacularly good short stories, and Gardner Dozois does a collection of them every year that just can't be beat. And before him, the late, great Terry Carr also did a collection every year, and it just couldn't be beat. And the more I got to thinking about those excellent stories, the more I realized that all of my favorite science fiction short stories are they're probably more my favorites than they are technically great. I love them, and that's what I want to talk about. I kept thinking of things, all kinds of things. I mean, some of them straddle the line. I think Scanners Live in Vain by Cordwainer Smith is actually a brilliant short story, and it's also one of my favorites. But then I think of something called, there's a longer short story called Brothers by Gordon Dixon, part of his Dorsai series, his series of books starring the Dorsai. They're a group, there's a small rocky uninhabitable planetoid called Dorsai, and it has no natural resources. And in this future reality, when planets, these interconnected federation of planets, are trading with each other and dealing with each other, the Dorsai have nothing to offer on the interplanetary market except their own men, except their own people as soldiers. Their planet is rough and inhospitable, and Dixon kind of sort of hints has a higher gradient of gravity, and as a result, Dorsai soldiers are the most prized mercenaries in the solar system. And in the story Brothers, there are twin brothers, and one of them is outward and smiling and friendly, and the other is reserved and icy and cold. And when, in the midst of a wrapping up operation of mercenary nature in a city, a sniper kills the happy brother, the grim brother imposes martial law on the city to hunt down his brother's killers. And I love the story. I just love it. From beginning to end, I just love it. But the more I look back on it, the more I realize that I might love it, but it's not probably great literature. And then I thought of my favorite science fiction story. And it isn't great literature. It's by a terrific science fiction writer, but it's not great literature. And it's called The Ugly Chickens. And it's by Howard Waldrop. And it is a short story about a young and slightly cocky ornithology graduate student in Austin, Texas, whose car is in the shop. And so he's taking the bus to work. And let me read you. I want to read you a bit of it. I'll read you just 2 bits of it, just because that's what this tag is about. Not tag, but that's what this event is about. Your favorite short story thing. He's on the bus, and it's crowded. It's crowded with, as we're told, yes, okay, I was idly leafing through greenways, extinct and vanishing birds of the world. The city bus was winding its way through the ritzy neighborhoods of Austin, stopping to let off the Chicanas, black women, and Vietnamese who tended the kitchens and gardens of the rich. I haven't seen one of those ugly chickens in a long time, a voice nearby said. A gray-haired lady was leaning across the aisle from me. I used to live near some folks who raised them when I was a girl, she said. She pointed. I looked down at the page that she was pointing at. What I should have said was, "That's quite impossible, madam. This is a drawing of an extinct bird on the island of Mauritius. It is perhaps the most famous dead bird in the world. Maybe you are mistaking this drawing for that of some rare Asiatic turkey, peafowl, or pheasant. I am sorry, but you are mistaken." I should have said all that. What she said was, "Oops, this is my stop," and got up to go. My name is Paul Lindberl. I am a 26-year-old graduate student of ornithology at the University of Texas, a teaching assistant. My name is not unknown in the field. I have several vices and follies, but I don't think foolishness is one of them. The stupid thing for me to do would have been to follow her. She stepped off the bus. I followed her. And he interviews this woman, and then he eventually interviews the people she worked for, and comes to the realization, the slow realization throughout the course of the story, that the dodos did not go extinct when we think they did. That a group of them lived in America, in the poorest part of the Appalachian hollers, all through the Depression. And as he sifts through the evidence that he starts to find in old abandoned chicken coops and in interviews with people way out in the middle of nowhere, in the snake-infested middle of nowhere, the story concentrates closer and closer on what is now inevitably going to be its climax, which is, will he find a living dodo? And there's a moment I want to read you. He's looking at old yellowed family photographs from one of the people he talks to. This is the photograph. It must have been taken about 1927. Annie Mae is wearing some unrecognizable piece of clothing that approximates a dress. She leans on a hoe, smiling a snagged-toothed smile. She looks to be 10 or 11. Her eyes are half hidden by the shadow of a brim of a gapped straw hat she wears. The earth she is standing in barefoot has been newly turned. Behind her is one corner of the house, and the barn beyond has upper hay windows open. Out-of-focus people are at work there. A few feet behind her, a huge male dodo is pecking at something on the ground. The front two-thirds of it shows, back to the stupid wings and the edge of the up-curved tail feathers. One foot is in the photo, having just scratched at something, possibly an earthworm, in the new plowed clods. Judging by the darkness, I'd say it was a gray or Mauritius dodo. And the shiver of that moment when Paul Lindbro looks at a 1927 photograph and in the background there's a dodo just never fails to work on me. I love it. I love the story, even though I think it's probably hack work of a type that I might be able on a very good day to do myself. That doesn't diminish it at all for me. And when I was thinking of short stories that probably don't rise to the level of art, genre short stories that probably don't, but that I love anyway, inevitably, in the course of thinking about this event, about Litmas Day 3, I was drawn back to what I think, pound for pound, is probably my very favorite short story of them all. And it's not John Cheever, and it's not Eudora Welty, and it's not any of these people that it should be. Instead, it's Arthur Conan Doyle. It's Sherlock Holmes. It's The Adventure of the Red-Headed League, which is a short story in which a man comes to Holmes and Watson for help. His name is Jabez Wilson, and he fears that he's been the victim of an elaborate and unbelievable practical joke, and he can't figure it out, and he wants to figure it out. That's all. That's what his motivation is. He hasn't lost anything. There's no murder. He wants Holmes to figure it out and tell him why anyone would go to the bother of playing this prank on him. It turns out that one day in his pawn shop, his assistant came to him and said, "It looks like the League has an opening." Jabez Wilson has no idea what he's talking about. His assistant says, "We've never heard of the Red-Headed League? It's a league of red-headed gentlemen here in the city. They have an opening. And there are bound to be plenty of applicants. You should apply, considering the flaming head of red hair you have yourself." And Jabez Wilson wants nothing of it. He's a bit of a sludge, a bit of a stodgy, stay-at-home person. But eventually he starts thinking about it and thinks, well, the advertisement in the paper is offering a paying position. And business at the shop hasn't been good. I don't lose anything by going to see what it's about. And when he gets to the address in question, the man who's there turns away all the other applicants and says, "Oh, no, we're not going to find a head of hair any better than yours. You have the job. And the job is to come here every day with a bottle of ink and a pen and a bunch of paper and copy out the Encyclopedia Britannica starting with the letter A." And Jabez Wilson doesn't believe it. He's about ready to talk himself out of it. And then thinks, well, the man put the money on the table in front of me. It's money. It might seem ridiculous, but it's definitely real. So he does it. He packs up his paper and he goes every day to this address and diligently copies out the Encyclopedia Britannica. And he's at the letter A, and he's at the letter B, and he's learning a lot. And then one day he goes there and the shop is closed. And no one's ever heard of it. There's a sign on the window saying the Red-Headed League is disbanded. And he's not out anything that he didn't have before. He's made a profit from this. But still, he wants to know what this was all about. So he goes to Holmes and asks him to figure it out. And after a little bit of jollity on Holmes and Watson's part, because it is kind of ridiculous, they decide to investigate. They go by Jabez Wilson's shop when he's not there. They talk to his assistant. They look at the address of the Red-Headed League. Holmes walks around the streets, tapping on the sidewalk with his cane, obviously thinking things, obviously starting to see the faintest glimmerings of something. We don't know what, of course, because Conan Doyle is perfect at that. And when Holmes has had a large amount of information, when he's gathered enough to know that something is going on here, and that it rises to the level of being worth his attention, but he still hasn't quite pieced it all together, he and Watson are frustrated by the whole thing. And Holmes says, now that we're done with this, we can retire to the concert hall for the evening and just forget about it all and visit Violin Land, is what he calls it. They go to a professional violin recital. And there's a moment that I just love. I want to read it to you. Sorry again for the bouncy cam here. This is still poised on pillows. My friend, this is Watson, of course, narrating. They're at the concert hall. My friend was an enthusiastic musician, being himself not only a very capable performer, but a composer of no ordinary merit. All the afternoon he sat in the stalls, wrapped in the most perfect happiness, gently waving his long, thin fingers in time to the music, while his gently smiling face and his languid, dreamy eyes were as unlike those of Holmes the sleuth-hound, Holmes the relentless, keen-witted, ready-handed criminal agent, as it was possible to conceive. In his singular character, the dual nature alternately reasserted itself, and his extreme exactness and astuteness represented, as I have often thought, the reaction against the poetic and contemplative mood which occasionally predominated in him. The swing of his nature took him from extreme languor to devouring energy, and as I knew well, he was never so truly formidable as when for days on end he had been lounging in his armchair amidst his improvisations and his black-letter editions. Then it was that the lust of the chase would suddenly come upon him, and that his brilliant reasoning power would rise to the level of intuition, until those who were unacquainted with his methods would look askance at him as on a man whose knowledge was not that of other mortals. When I saw him that afternoon, so enwrapped in the music at St. James's Hall, I felt that an evil time might be coming upon those whom he had set himself to hunt down. That juxtaposition. We get the word gently twice. We get, if you look at the prose instead of just hearing me ineptly read it, you'll see that it lulls you. So that last sentence, hunt down, springs on you like the talons of a hawk. Oh, I love it so much. And of course it turns out that Holmes is right. Something much deeper is going on. And when you're reading The Red-Headed League for the first time, you have no idea what it is. It's only when you're reading it the second and third and fourth or in my 150th time that you realize that, of course, the ruse here has nothing to do with the Red-Headed League. The ruse has to do with someone wanting Jabez Wilson out of his pawn shop for hours every day. And why would that be? And the story goes on from there. And I could read it forever. I literally could read it forever. So that's... those are just two short stories that I wanted to celebrate this time around. I can't actually pick a favorite unless it's the Red-Headed League. And can you imagine how embarrassing it would be for me to go to a literary soiree like the type that my Boston Brahmin friends are always urging me to go to on Beacon Hill? Can you imagine how embarrassing it would be if in the middle of that, shrimp and canaps literary soiree, somebody asked me what my favorite short story was, and I said it was The Adventure of the Red-Headed League from Arthur Conan Doyle. Although, then again, you never know. It might be that the whole room would erupt with agreement. One way or another. I tried to make this tag about the best short stories that I love, and I couldn't do it. Instead, I had to do The Ugly Chickens and the Red-Headed League. So I'm gonna wrap it up there. And once again, I want to see all the rest of you do this. And I'll be back tomorrow with Litmas Day 3. Thank you.